Hey everyone, what is happening? Welcome back to the Performance Recap. Today we're going to talk about barefoot training. It's a topic that's, it skyrockets up. People are interested in it, they're doing it. And then I've seen it kind of like fade away with some other research, and I've seen it pop up again like it's real. It's the next fad. We got barefoot training shoes, we got toe shoes, we got wide toe box. I believe they're coming out with a wide toe box lifting shoe, right? So there's such a huge conversation of feet now. So this is something that I think it's going to be very beneficial to talk about. I have this conversation all the time with athletes. So should you train barefoot? I watched an episode on the PJF Performance podcast with Emily Splikal, I believe her name is, Dr. Emily Splikal, who's a podiatrist. And something that she said was profound is like, training barefoot all the time may not be the best thing, right? Just being barefoot all the time with load may not be, optimal for health. And, I don't disagree, right? I think I've trained barefoot for a full session barefoot, so I think it comes in ebbs and flows. What I always tell people is, when you're training barefoot, or should you wear like, minimalist shoes? I wear toe shoes and people are like, oh, should I wear those? I think things have to be done in moderation. So if you have always worn, if heels, basketball shoes, shoes with high arches, arch supports, shoes with thick heels so you're elevated in the air, I don't think you go right to barefoot training. I don't think you go right to toe shoes because that could shock your body and cause some pain. I remember when I first wore toe shoes, I wore them for like 3 days straight in a row. And I was like, oh, I feel great. Like, I feel good. And then I noticed, like, on that fourth day, it's like, oh, my low back is kind of like, it feels more tight, more stiff. And I think that's because I just jumped right into these barefoot shoes without dosing it appropriately. But what I did is, I would spend time outside barefoot. I spent time training barefoot, not the whole session, small dosage. And then I got some wide toe box shoes. And then after a year or so, I went to some barefoot shoes or toe shoes. And I think that helped, not feel aggressive pain. But I also went from no toe shoes to toe shoes for 4 days straight, right? So that's like, 148 hours of toe shoes, or just like when I was on my feet, right? So that was like, 32 straight hours on my feet, and I'm working in a gym, working in a basketball court. I think that did a lot to my low back that I wasn't prepared for. So if you're someone who's contemplating, should I be doing this? Start ground zero. Don't spend thousands of dollars on new shoes. Just go barefoot at home. Go barefoot outside. Because there are going to be benefits, right? If you always wear shoes, you're lacking in the proprioceptive feedback of the feet. Your feet is losing the ability to do its job. Same thing with arches. I don't think arch supports are necessarily bad because if you have chronic feet pain when you do everything, you don't want to be in pain all the time. So yes, wear arches. But if you're relying on them because you have flat feet and you don't want to have pain, I think that could be negative to your performance because then those muscles that should do those jobs become dormant. And then you're losing that strength. You're losing the ability of your feet to do what they're going to do. And that means something else up the chain could be overcompensating and taking over. Because I used to wear orthotics all the time. And I don't wear them anymore. And my feet feel good, but I've trained my feet. So with that being said, I think it's important that you train your feet at a small dosage to build up the capacity, build up the resiliency, build up the strength. And then you can increase to like wide toe box shoes, to toe spacers, to toe shoes, to see how that feels. When it comes to strength training barefoot all of the time, I don't necessarily think I agree with like doing heavy lifts barefoot simply because if you have collapsed arches, if you have weak feet, and then you trap bar deadlift barefoot or put a bar in your back barefoot, right? Your feet aren't strong enough to handle, whatever, 45 pounds or 225. So that means something's going to take over, right? Your tibia could do something, your knee's going to do something, your femur's going to do something, your hips are going to compensate. And nowadays, when I work with athletes, I have not encountered too many athletes that do not need some type of constraint to improve their squat. That's like elevating their heels so they get full range of motion, right? So doing that, elevating your heels barefoot could be uncomfortable because if you have a wood block, if you have plywood, if you have a plate, if you have the steel, wedges, that could hurt your heels. So therefore, I don't think you should be loading too heavy barefoot because I don't think a lot of people have the strength barefoot to do it. And I've seen some athletes who are squatting or deadlifting barefoot and their feet are yanked outwards, right? Which means their tibia is going to overly internally rotate, and then their femur is going to overly externally rotate, and they're going to struggle with hip internal or hip external rotation, right? So doing it that way could be detrimental. But I don't think it's a bad idea if you do some of your prep work barefoot or your accessories barefoot, or if you're hopping and skipping barefoot. I think all of that would be great. So long-winded question, it's in moderation. So for someone who has weak feet, who has, who has overly pronated feet, collapsed arches, I don't think putting a bar on your back and squatting barefoot is helpful. But if you're doing, like your split squats barefoot, your RDLs barefoot, your single leg RDLs barefoot, you're doing your skipping or your warm up barefoot, I think that can have huge benefits. Your recovery sessions could be some light calisthenic training barefoot. I think that could be very beneficial to athletes. So with this question, is barefoot training good or bad? It depends, right? It depends on who you are, injury history, what your goals are. But I do think all athletes, all adults should spend good amount of time barefoot. Strengthen your feet. Calf raises barefoot. Roll your feet out with a lacrosse ball. Roll your calves out with a foam roller. Get the sensation, the proprioceptors back in your feet, which will help you in your sport. Because I work with a lot of basketball players and volleyball players, and they wear basketball shoes, and the heels are thick, right? So their feet don't ever touch the ground, so they're not getting that feedback, which is a big indicator where they're getting some knee pain, because the feet aren't doing what they need to do. And then, boom, tibia does what it does, and stress goes to the knee because their hip can't do their job. So I hope that brings light to this conversation. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode. Like, comment, share with someone, and I look forward to seeing you again soon. Peace.